So Cindy, let me ask you a question about the green economy. The green, anyone in the audience familiar with the green economy? Anybody want to tell me what it is before I ask Cindy what it is? Anyone? Green economy, going once, definition, there.
I would venture, since you were with the EPA, that green economy has a lot to do with clean technology and inspiring green jobs, which is federally defined, or at least in California. In California, we define green jobs as anything in the clean tech world that's training programs, making sure we have domestic production of renewable energy or other alternative technologies. I would say there's other definitions, though.
I like that. Any other definitions? Well, okay, Cindy, so what are some of your examples of Region 9 in terms of the water pollution work that you do, or something around green infrastructure that would talk about the green economy?
First, I want to thank the person who gave that definition, because I often feel like when we're talking about terms, especially as it relates to environment or any other sectors, that people have different ideas about the terms. That's definitely one definition of green economy. And the work that I do, I often think about green infrastructure and low impact development as the green economy, and working with various different stakeholder groups, trying to figure out within the framework of Clean Water Act and our regulations, how do we try to figure out more different types of solutions that are in the gray area to try to kind of achieve our water quality benefits, but at the same time figure out for business opportunities what are better in terms of meeting compliance, but a more cost-effective approach. And so that is something that EPA is super excited about, that we're working on, which is green infrastructure. And when I say green infrastructure, I mean in terms of our traditional, for example, wastewater treatment plants or treatment options that tend to be extremely expensive because you have to build a huge structure. What we mean is, for example, rain gardens or vegetated swales or green roofs, those type of activities that actually has really shown very huge benefits in terms of reduction in pollution in the water, reducing the flow, and also decreasing the cost, and that's been a huge thing. So I want to mention some of the business opportunities that we've been working with, particularly, most of you might be from California, in Southern California, working with the city of LA, for example, and we ventured with them and we partnered with them on with some funding, and they were looking at some streets where they can try to apply some of these low impact development approaches or green infrastructure approaches. And they were so successful at meeting the goals that they decided to do that at other streets and then include an ordinance in their city code. So they have a city of LA, actually Santa Monica does too, have a low impact development ordinance in their code. And that we feel that that's huge, that's just super impressive to us. And what it's really led is to provide opportunities for small and big businesses to look outside the box of regulation, of saying like, you know what, we know that we try to meet this, here's the things that we've been doing, but it just costs millions of dollars and we can't do it. But here's this other box that they're expanding and trying to show us, hey, if we do this, that's also going to meet the same goals. So this is something we're super excited about. I'll give you another example that we're working on, which is in Lake Tahoe, where we've incorporated a pollutant trading approach, where we figure out with the different cities and the municipalities of how they can trade pollutants. Now, you guys have probably heard about air emissions trading, perhaps. Well, we're talking about water quality trading, and that's super exciting for us. Obviously there's a lot of details in the nuts and bolts, but for the most part, everybody's on board, everybody's willing to move forward, and there's a lot of cost savings. Oftentimes when we go this route, I think the federal government, particularly EPA, recognizes that endeavor, and we try to provide grants, also tax exemption options, so there's a lot of those. If some of you are interested, you should look at EPA's sustainability portfolio that really kind of outlines out some of these very details. And then one last thing I should mention is the environmental management system, which is a leadership opportunity that we work with a lot of our bigger businesses. But if you basically partner with us on this environmental management system, then you basically get technical guidance from us. You get try to figure out how to lower your compliance cost, and sometimes you might even get some flexibility on the regulations. So we're really excited about this approach, and if you guys have questions, please go to EPA's homepage, look up the sustainability portfolio, or come talk to Stephanie and myself afterwards.
I'd like to add something to that. Sometimes we talk about a continuum within the green economy, and so a lot of what we just talked about is really on that dark green side, on the technical and the engineering and the innovation side. But I don't know, does anyone think that maybe a gardener or someone that does landscaping, that person has a green job, maybe? Anyone think that? Okay, a few people. What about a real estate agent? Is that a green job? I know that that it's important to be specific and to define things so that you can actually measure them. But one of the other things that I would offer up, and this is one of the conversations that we have frequently when we have roundtables in various regions, or when we're talking especially to colleges and universities, and it's more on in the area of sustainability, is to think about the environmental impacts of all positions, because all positions have environmental impacts. So a gardener or a landscape person who knows about xeriscaping and water conservation very much is someone that has a green job. And from a competitive standpoint, for someone who doesn't understand those aspects of landscaping, they may in fact not be as competitive for someone who's looking for that particular kind of expertise. But that's an example. The same with a realtor who's selling property and is able to talk about the energy efficiency elements of the property that they're selling. One of the things that we encourage people to do is identify the environmental elements of the job that they have and what kinds of changes and tweaks they can make to the work that they do that also has a positive environmental impact. So that's a little bit more on the light green side of the green economy. Any comments on that from anyone? Oprah talks to the audience too, right? Am I missing how that works? She talks to the guest and then she just randomly, not that I'm Oprah. I mean, Cindy could be Oprah too. I'm not saying that, but I
always wanted to be Oprah.
Did you always want to be
Yes, I
Oprah?
did. I love that she gets to meet all these different cool people to ask them questions, and I have tons of questions all the time.
Well, look at all these cool people. So we should, you know what I'm saying? There's a comment, yes.
So I'm interested to hear how the EPA encourages the light green economy. So how would you go out and talk to landscapers and convince them that they should be doing xeriscaping, or realtors that they should be focusing on the energy efficiency of a home? How do you do that? How do you implement that? That's
actually part of our stakeholder engagement. So all under this rubric of expanding the environmental conversation, that's the way we actually begin to have the conversation, to say that it doesn't have to just be the dark green conversation, but when we're bringing in an association of realtors to speak with the administrator or some of our own other senior staffs in our Office of Air or Office of Water, these are exactly the kinds of conversations that we have. We also have some smaller programs within our Office of Small Business that actually takes businesses through how to green their own businesses. So we're a regulatory agency, first and foremost, but we are beginning to sort of go for this triple bottom line effect of how we do our work, where we're making sure that, and we've always taken the economy into account when we're doing our regulations, but the social impact, also the cultural impact of the things that we're doing, and then making sure that we're not just preaching to the choir, really, and that we're giving everyone their space in this conversation to see themselves. So it's predominantly through stakeholder engagement and outreach that we have the discussions to begin to broaden where people see themselves in the environmental discussion.
I just want to offer up an example. One of the things that we're trying to work on the ground, particularly here in the regional office, which is that there's stormwater management. That's the flow that comes off everybody's land. For example, if you live in a subdivision and residential units, lots of water come off the land, and sometimes those subdivisions are managed by a management company or an HOA. And one of the things we're hoping to do is to reach out to these, kind of managed area and talk to them and inform them about kind of the benefits. And we would do that basically through the cities themselves and then through the municipalities, where we try to include that kind of a discussion and public education outreach directly to the residential HOA, for example, where they're educated, and then that way that information gets passed down. And so we're actually trying to think about how can we include that in a regulatory framework where it's really positive. So. Well, actually, following up on that question where we talked about the light green and the dark green, I had a question about your role in DC and working with water infrastructure and green economy. Mm-hmm. And you probably come across the agents as you're going through their work in DC, you're privy to rules and regulations on a broader perspective. Can you cite some examples of industries and companies and consumers that have benefited from our regulations? I mean, we kind of talked about how we try to work within the gray area or outside the box, but what are some examples where the different interest groups have actually benefited from the regulations?
Well, as industries work to comply with the regulations, they tend to innovate. Mm-hmm. And so there are several companies. The one that most immediately comes to mind is Thermo Fisher out of Massachusetts, right, that makes air monitoring control systems. And because of the recent mercury and air toxics mm-hmm. rule, their CEO was quoted, I think back in February in a Bloomberg article, that he estimated anywhere between $50 to $100 million increase in revenues. There's an association of clean tech companies that believe that they are going to increase their employment of about 300,000 over the coming years, right, again, as they work to comply with the regulations. So there are several ways that the regulations benefit businesses. I also think that it's important to note how they benefit the consumers as well. I talked earlier, lots of statistics and numbers about the health impact of the regulations, but just yesterday, I think it was yesterday, we finalized our fuel efficiency vehicle standards with Department of Transportation. And so between now through 2025, the automobile companies will be designing cars that get about 54.5 miles per gallon in terms of their fuel efficiency. So that alone is going to save consumers right, about $8,000. And there are, I'm going to get this statistic wrong because I did not write it down, but I believe it's 9 of the 13 or 13 of the major automobile manufacturers were part of this conversation all along. And so consumers will also maintain their variety of choice among cars. So it's not as if only a few automobile companies are going to apply the standard. Consumers will benefit, and they'll still, maintain their choices among automobiles. So those are two of the things that come to mind.